James's mother stood at the reception tables while the doors were still closed, and by the time we discovered what she had done, $1,900,000 in wedding gifts had already moved into her personal account. I want to say it slowly, because the number itself does not feel real when you write it down on a page. $1,900,000, cash from envelopes, certified checks made out to my daughter and her new husband, two-wire transfers from family trusts that had been built over 40 years for exactly this kind of moment. All of it gone in 30 days, into a checking account none of us had ever seen, opened by a woman who smiled at the rehearsal dinner and called my daughter sweetheart, while she signed the deposit slips in her head. I am Margaret. My daughter is Vivian. Her husband is James. And the woman who took the gifts is Constance Calloway, James's mother, who stood up at the rehearsal dinner with a glass in her hand and told 200 people to come see her personally if they had questions about the gift coordination. I noticed it. I let it pass. Mothers of grooms can be a certain way, and I had been told my whole life that you do not start a war the night before a wedding. There was a sealed envelope in my bag the entire weekend. I did not know it was going to matter. It held the original printed receipts from the wedding programs, the ones with the joint account information for Vivian and James, the ones I had paid for and folded by hand at my kitchen table 3 weeks before the ceremony. Constance removed every single copy from the reception tables before the doors opened. I kept the master set in my purse because I am the kind of mother who keeps everything. That envelope, sealed with a piece of tape I never thought I would have to break, is the reason my daughter has her money today. Stay with me. There is a reason the attorney told me, very quietly, that what Constance did not understand about paper was the only thing that saved us. If you have ever watched family members forget respect the moment money entered the room, stay with me. And if this story speaks to you, subscribe to my channel for more stories like this, because the truth is often already written down. Vivian and James were married on a Saturday in October at a lakeside estate outside Chattanooga, Tennessee. The leaves had turned the color of old copper, and the water held the sky in pieces. My husband Daniel had passed 2 years earlier. Pancreatic cancer. Quick, the doctor said, as though that were a kindness. He had walked Vivian through her college graduation and her engagement, and then he was gone before he could walk her down an aisle. So I did it. I walked my daughter down a path of white petals on a stone terrace, and I felt my husband's hand on my elbow the whole way, even though only one of us was breathing. Daniel was the one who first taught Vivian about money. He was an engineer by training, the kind of man who balanced his checkbook by hand on Sunday afternoons even after the bank started doing it for him. He used to say that money is just a record of trust. You give it, you receive it, you write it down. He kept a small ledger in the top drawer of his desk for 30 years, and after he died, I kept it there, untouched, because some drawers you do not open without a reason. I had a reason, eventually, but I am getting ahead of myself. The Calloways came into our lives the way most in-laws do. James met Vivian at a hospital fundraiser in Nashville. He was kind, steady, the sort of young man who held doors and remembered names. His father had passed 5 years before ours, and his mother Constance had remarried and divorced once since. She lived alone in a large house in Brentwood that was, by her own description at every dinner, more than I need but exactly what I deserve. I tried to like her. I think I did like her for a while. She had a laugh that filled rooms and an opinion about every restaurant in 3 states. She was the kind of woman who organized other people's lives without being asked, and I told myself that was just her way of caring. The first time I felt something off was at the engagement party. Constance arrived an hour early, walked through the venue, and rearranged the table cards so that her side of the family sat closer to the bride and groom than mine did. When I noticed, she touched my arm and said, "Margaret, you and I both know who has more energy for this. Let me help." I let her help. I told myself it was generous. I told myself a lot of things in those months. Vivian and James asked me to coordinate the wedding because, as Vivian put it, "Mom, you are the only one who reads the fine print." She was right. I read every contract. I called every vendor. I sat with the venue manager and the caterer and the photographer and walked through every detail twice. And when it came to the gifts, I did what Daniel would have done. I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of cardstock and a printer, and I made the inserts for the wedding programs myself. The insert was a single page. On the front, a poem Vivian had loved since she was 12. On the back, a note that read, "Vivian and James are grateful for your presence above all. If you wish to honor them with a gift, Their joint account information is below for wire transfers, and certified checks may be made out to James and Vivian Calloway. Then the bank name, the routing number, the account number, the mailing address for paper checks, plain print, no decoration, the kind of page Daniel would have approved of. I printed 250 of them. I folded each one by hand. I tucked one into every program. And I kept 12 extra in a manila envelope in my purse because that is what my husband had taught me. You always keep a master copy. You always keep a record. You never assume the original will survive the day. That envelope sat in my bag through the rehearsal dinner, the morning of the wedding, the ceremony, the reception, and the long, quiet drive home. I did not open it for 3 weeks. When I finally did, I was sitting across from a financial fraud attorney in a small office in Nashville, and the receipts inside were the only proof we had that the truth had ever existed in print. The rehearsal dinner was where the first sign showed itself. Looking back, I see it clearly. At the time, I saw a woman with a glass of wine and a need to be seen. We held the dinner at a restaurant on the water. Long tables, candles, the kind of place where the bread comes warm, and the conversation runs late. Vivian gave a small speech thanking everyone for coming. James thanked his mother and mine. And then, before anyone had asked her to, Constance stood up. She tapped her glass with a spoon. The room went quiet. She smiled the way she always smiled, wide and certain, and she said, "I just want everyone to know that I am acting as the gift steward this weekend. If anyone has questions about coordinating their gifts, transfers, anything at all, please come see me personally. I will make sure everything reaches the children." She raised her glass. People clapped politely. Someone made a joke about mothers being the real planners. The dinner moved on. I leaned over to Vivian and whispered, "Did you ask her to do that?" Vivian looked confused for a moment and then said, "No, but it is fine, Mom. She means well." I let it go. I told myself that a mother of the groom wanting to be involved was not a crime. I told myself the inserts were already in the programs and the account information was already in print, and there was nothing she could really do. That was the first red flag, and I walked past it. The morning of the wedding was a clear, cold Saturday. The kind of October morning where you can see your breath in the parking lot and the sun feels like it is trying to apologize for the wind. The reception was set up in a long pavilion with glass walls overlooking the lake. The tables were dressed in cream linen with small arrangements of eucalyptus and white roses, and at every place setting was a folded program with the insert tucked inside. I arrived at the venue at 9 in the morning to do a final walkthrough. Constance was already there. I did not know that until later. A young woman from the venue staff named Hannah told me, 3 weeks afterward, that she had seen Constance arrive at 7:30 and walk through the pavilion alone for almost an hour before anyone else got there. Hannah said she thought it was strange, but she was new, and Constance had told her she was just checking on a few details for Margaret. Hannah did not call me. She had no reason to. The mother of the groom was checking on details, that was all. What Constance did in that hour, I now know in detail, because the venue had cameras at the pavilion entrances but not inside the room. The cameras showed her walking in with a small canvas tote bag at 7:32 and walking out at 8:26 with the same bag, fuller. The bank records and the program inserts told us the rest. She went table to table. She lifted every program. She opened every fold. She removed the insert with my account information for Vivian and James, and she replaced it with a small printed card. The card said, in matching cream and gold cardstock that nobody noticed was different. For the convenience of our guests, gift wires and transfers may be sent to the family newlywed account, followed by a bank name, a routing number, and an account number. The account number was hers, personal, her name only. Opened, the records would later show, 4 months before the wedding. She put the original inserts in the canvas tote. She walked them out to her car. She drove home that night and put them in a kitchen drawer. The attorney's investigator found them there during the discovery phase, untouched, 246 of them, with the poem still folded crisp on the front. She had not even thrown them away. I think about that sometimes. She kept them, as though even she could not quite let go of what she had taken. The wedding itself was beautiful. I want to say that. I want to say that in the middle of all of this, my daughter had a beautiful wedding. She danced with James to a song my husband used to hum while he balanced the checkbook. She cut a small white cake. She hugged me twice and called me Mama, the way she had not since she was 9. The guests gave their gifts. The envelopes piled up on a small table near the entrance, the way they always do. and a young man in a black vest from the venue staff carried them to a back office for safekeeping. Or so I thought. I learned later that Constance had told the venue, by email, 2 weeks before the wedding, that she would be personally collecting the gift table at the end of the night and that the venue did not need to handle it. She signed the email, Margaret Whitfield, mother of the bride. She used my name. She used my email signature, which she had copied from a thank you note I had sent her 2 months earlier. The venue had no reason to question it. That was the second red flag. I did not see it that night. I could not have seen it. But it had been waiting in someone's inbox for 14 days. Some people planned the wedding. Some people planned the exit. The first 3 weeks after the wedding were a blur of thank you notes and travel photos. Vivian and James went to Italy for their honeymoon. They came back tan and tired and full of stories about a small town outside Florence where the bread was still baked in a stone oven. Vivian came over for dinner the Sunday after they returned. She helped me wash the dishes, and as she dried a wine glass with one of my old kitchen towels, she said something that did not register at first. Mom, I think only a few of the wires came through. It is a little strange. We got the personal checks in the mail, but barely any of the bigger gifts. I asked her how many. She shrugged. Maybe 4, 5. Aunt Joan sent her wire. The Petersons sent theirs. But Robert called yesterday asking if we had received his, and I had to tell him I would check. Robert was my husband's oldest friend, a retired civil engineer who had known Vivian since she was an infant. He had told me, months before, that he and his wife wanted to give the children a gift that mattered because Daniel had once co-signed a loan for him in 1987 that had saved his small business. Robert was the kind of man who paid debts even after the person he owed had died. I called Robert that evening. I asked him if his gift had cleared. He said, Margaret, of course it cleared. I sent the wire the Monday after the wedding. $40,000. I have the confirmation right here. I asked him what account he had sent it to. He read me a number. It was not Vivian's account. I sat down on the kitchen floor with the phone still pressed to my ear. I remember the linoleum was cold and the refrigerator was making the small humming sound it always made, and Daniel's ledger was in the drawer 6 feet away. I asked Robert where he had gotten the account number. He said, from the card at our table at the reception, dear, Constance had said at the rehearsal dinner that she was coordinating gifts. The card said it was the family newlywed account. I assumed. He assumed. We all would have assumed. I told him I was going to need a copy of the wire confirmation. He sent it within an hour. That night, I called 11 more guests. 8 of them confirmed they had wired or deposited gifts to the same account number that Robert had read me. The other 3 had given cash or paper checks, which I would later learn had also disappeared into the same place by a slightly different route. By midnight, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pen and a list of names and numbers, and the running total on the bottom of the page was already past $900,000. That was the third red flag, and by the time I saw it, the damage was already done. The next morning, I drove to Nashville and walked into the office of a financial fraud attorney named Eleanor Brewster. She had been recommended to me by a friend at church whose late husband had been a probate judge. Eleanor was in her 60s, with short gray hair and a quiet voice and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She listened to me for 45 minutes without interrupting. When I was finished, she set her pen down and said, Margaret, I want you to go home and find every piece of paper you have from this wedding. Every receipt, every program, every email, every thank you note, bring it all to me on Wednesday. I said, I have the original program inserts, the ones with my daughter's account information. I kept 12 of them in an envelope in my purse. Eleanor looked at me for a long time. Then she said very softly, Mrs. Whitfield, that envelope is the case. That was not the clause they should have worried about. The first thing Eleanor did was file a request for a temporary asset freeze on Constance's personal accounts under Tennessee civil procedure. She did this on a Thursday afternoon. By Monday morning, a judge had granted it. Constance learned about the freeze when she tried to write a check at a furniture store in Franklin, and the card was declined. She called her son James. James did not answer. He had been told, by Eleanor and by me, not to take her calls until further notice. The second thing Eleanor did was subpoena Constance's bank records. This took longer. Banks do not move quickly, even when they want to. But by the middle of the third week, the records arrived in a sealed white envelope on Eleanor's desk, and she called me and asked me to come in. I drove to her office on a Tuesday morning. The receptionist offered me coffee. I sat in a small conference room with a long wooden table and a window that looked out at a brick wall. Eleanor came in with a thin folder. She set it down between us. She opened it. The first page was a 1-month statement of Constance Calloway's personal checking account. The deposit column ran down the right side of the page, line after line. Wire transfer, $40,000. Wire transfer, $65,000. Cash deposit, $12,500. Wire transfer, $200,000 from a family trust I recognized as belonging to a great-aunt of James's who lived in Charleston. Cash deposit, $8,000. Wire transfer, $120,000 from Robert. The list went on, page after page. The total at the bottom of the third page read, $1,900,000 in deposits over 30 days. The withdrawal column was almost empty. A few $100s here and there for groceries, a car payment, a utility bill. No outgoing transfers to Vivian, no outgoing transfers to James, no outgoing transfers to anyone. Eleanor reached into the folder and pulled out something else. It was a small cream and gold card, the kind of card I had seen at every place setting at the reception, except I had not really seen it because I had assumed my own inserts were inside the programs. The card had Constance's account number printed on it in elegant serif type. Eleanor laid it next to one of my original receipts from the manila envelope. The two pieces of paper sat side by side on the conference table, almost the same color, almost the same weight, almost the same size. Almost. Eleanor said, "Margaret, this is the case. This is the whole case, right here." The envelope had been sealed longer than her patience lasted. I want to tell you what it felt like to sit in that room and look at those two pieces of paper. It did not feel like a victory. It did not feel like rage, exactly, although the rage was there underneath, waiting. It felt like the moment in a hospital when a doctor finally tells you what you already suspected. A confirmation, a weight that has been hovering above you for weeks, finally setting down on your shoulders so you can carry it like a real thing. I thought about Daniel. I thought about his ledger in the top drawer of his desk. I thought about the way he used to write the date in the left column, and the description in the middle, and the amount on the right, and how he would draw a small line under the total at the end of every month so that the page knew it was finished. He used to say, "Margaret, money does not lie. People lie about money. The money itself just sits there and tells you what happened." The money in Constance's account told us what had happened. Eleanor wrote it down on a yellow legal pad in her own neat handwriting. She did not need to embellish. The numbers did the work. The next step was the civil filing. Under Tennessee law, what Constance had done was a form of gift fraud, which is a civil tort with criminal overtones. Eleanor explained it to me in plain language the way good attorneys do. She said, "When a person represents themselves as an authorized recipient of a gift intended for another party, and they accept that gift with the intent to retain it, that is fraudulent conversion. It does not require us to prove she planned this for years, although the timing of the account opening will help us. It only requires us to prove that the gifts were intended for Vivian and James and that Constance knowingly received them in their place." She filed the complaint on a Friday. Constance was served at her front door on a Saturday morning by a deputy from the Davidson County Sheriff's Office. James told me later that his mother called him 11 times that afternoon. He did not pick up. The will did not create the truth. It preserved it. And in this case, the will was a wedding program, folded by hand at a kitchen table, by a mother who kept the master copy in her purse because she had been taught to. I want to take a moment here to tell you about the second envelope, because there was a second one, and it changes the shape of this story. Eleanor's investigator, a quiet man named Howard who had spent 30 years with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation before retiring into private work, asked me one afternoon if Constance had ever sent me anything in writing about the wedding. I said yes, of course. We had exchanged dozens of emails. Howard asked if I had kept them. I said I had. He asked if I had ever received anything from her by certified mail. I thought for a moment, and then I remembered. 3 months before the wedding, Constance had sent me a thick cream-colored envelope by certified mail. Inside was a long letter, 4 single-spaced pages, in which she laid out what she called her vision for the gift coordination. She had proposed, in writing, that all gifts should be funneled through a single account that she would manage as a kind of informal trust on behalf of the couple. She had written that this would, and I am quoting from memory because the original is now in a court file, spare Vivian and James the burden of administrative complexity in their first year of marriage. I had written back politely and told her that the children would be receiving gifts directly into their joint account and that the program inserts I was preparing would reflect that. I had thanked her for her thoughtfulness. I had filed the letter and my reply in a drawer in my office and not thought about either one again. Howard asked for both. I gave them to him on a Wednesday. He read them in my kitchen while I made him a cup of coffee. When he was finished, he set the pages down very carefully and said, Mrs. Whitfield, she wrote you a letter telling you what she was going to do. You wrote her one back telling her she could not. She did it anyway. That letter is the second piece of evidence. Eleanor entered both letters into the court record the following Monday. The judge, a woman in her 50s who had presided over financial fraud cases for 20 years, read them both during a pretrial hearing and looked over her glasses at Constance's attorney. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Eleanor told me afterward that the judge's silence in that moment was worth more than any motion she could have filed. Greed gets loud when paperwork gets quiet. Constance's attorney, a man named Bradford, who specialized in family disputes, tried for several weeks to argue that what his client had done was a misunderstanding. He argued that Constance had believed she was acting as an informal trustee. He argued that she had always intended to disperse the funds to Vivian and James once the couple had returned from their honeymoon and settled into married life. He argued that the freeze on her account had prevented her from doing so. Eleanor responded with 3 documents. The certified letter Constance had sent me 3 months before the wedding, my written reply, and the bank records showing that the account into which the gifts had been deposited had been opened 4 months before the wedding, in Constance's name only, with no provision for any other signatory and no reference to Vivian or James anywhere in the paperwork. The judge ruled within an hour of reviewing the filings. She found that Constance had received the funds under false pretenses and had retained them with the intent to convert them to her own use. She entered a civil judgment ordering Constance to return the full $1,900,000 to Vivian and James within 180 days. She also issued a civil restraining order preventing Constance from contacting Vivian, James, or any of their financial accounts for a period of 3 years. There was no jury trial. There did not need to be. The documents had done the work. The day the judgment was entered, Eleanor called me. She said, Margaret, can you come down to the office on Friday at 10? Vivian and James will be there. I would like Constance and her attorney to be there as well. There are some papers that need to be signed and delivered in person. I said yes. I want to tell you about that morning, because it is the moment I will remember for the rest of my life. It was a cold Friday in early December, frost on the grass. The kind of light that comes through a window low and gold and makes you squint. Vivian and James arrived first. Vivian was wearing a navy coat that had belonged to her father. She had taken it from his closet 2 years earlier and never given it back. James held her hand. They sat on one side of the conference table. I sat next to them. Eleanor sat at the head. Constance arrived 10 minutes late with her attorney. She did not look at Vivian. She did not look at James. She did not look at me. She sat at the far end of the table and folded her hands and stared at a point on the wall above Eleanor's left shoulder. Her hair was perfectly done. Her makeup was perfectly done. Her hands were trembling. Eleanor opened a folder. She laid 3 documents on the table. The first was the original wedding program insert, the one I had printed at my kitchen table and folded by hand. Cream paper, plain print. Vivian and James's joint account information in clean black type. Eleanor slid it to the center of the table. The second was one of Constance's replacement cards, the cream and gold one, the fake account number. Eleanor laid it next to the first. The third was the 1-month bank statement. Eleanor unfolded it and laid it across both, so that the deposit column ran down the table like a river. She said very quietly, Constance, please confirm that the account number on this card is yours. Constance did not speak for a long moment. Then she said, yes. Eleanor said, please confirm that the deposits on this statement match the dates of the wedding gifts. Constance said, yes. Eleanor said, please confirm that no portion of these funds has been transferred to Vivian or James Calloway. Constance said, yes. There was a silence in the room then that I am not sure I can describe accurately. It was not the silence of shock. We were past shock. It was the silence of a story finishing itself in front of us, like the last page of a book turning on its own. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the manila envelope. I opened it for the first time since I had sealed it 8 weeks earlier. I took out the original master receipt, the one with Vivian and James's correct account information, and I slid it across the table to my daughter. I said, Vivian, this is what was always yours. She took it with both hands. She read it. She started to cry very quietly, the way she used to cry when she was small, with no sound and her shoulders barely moving. James put his arm around her. Constance did not look up. The attorney had received the second letter months before the funeral, the certified one, the one she had written herself. She had told us what she was going to do, and then she had done it. And then she had sat at the far end of a conference table while a piece of cream cardstock from a kitchen printer told the rest of the story. Constance returned the full $1,900,000 within 90 days, well ahead of the court's deadline. She sold her house in Brentwood to do it. The transfer was handled by a court-appointed monitor, and Vivian and James received the funds in 2 installments, both deposited into the joint account whose number had always been printed on the original wedding programs. James told me later that the first deposit cleared on a Tuesday at 3 in the afternoon, and Vivian stood in their kitchen and cried for almost an hour with her phone in her hand and a glass of water on the counter. The restraining order remained in place. James spoke to his mother twice during that period through Eleanor's office, both times in writing. He told her, in the second letter, that he loved her and that he forgave her, and that forgiveness did not mean access. He told her that what she had taken was not the money, although the money was a great deal. What she had taken was the trust, and that, he said, would take longer to return than 180 days. I do not know if Constance ever wrote back. If she did, James did not show me. Vivian and James used part of the money to pay off James's medical school loans. They put a portion into a college savings account for a child they were already hoping for. They kept the rest in a quiet, conservative fund that Daniel would have approved of, the kind of fund that grows slowly and does not call attention to itself. Vivian told me, 6 months later, that every time she logs in to check the balance, she still feels the weight of the receipt I handed her in that conference room. She keeps it in a small frame on a shelf in her office. Cream paper, plain print, her father's lessons folded into a single page. I want to say something now about my husband. Daniel did not live to see his daughter married. He did not live to see his grandchildren when they come. He did not live to see this story, and for that I am, in a strange way, grateful. He would have been calm about it. He would have read the bank statements with his glasses pushed down on his nose and made small notes in the margins in pencil. He would have said something dry and practical like, "Well, Margaret, the records are clear." But I think it would have hurt him. He believed in family the way he believed in arithmetic. He did not understand people who broke either one. I keep his ledger in the top drawer of his desk. I have not added a single entry to it. But on the inside of the front cover, in the small space below his name, I wrote in my own hand, 3 months after the judgment, "Vivian, October, restored." That is the only entry I have ever written in his book. It will be the only one. I think about the morning of the wedding sometimes, about Constance walking through the empty pavilion with a canvas tote bag at 7:32 in the morning, about her lifting every program and replacing every insert with a card she had printed in her own home office, about the way she must have moved quickly and quietly, with a kind of purpose that comes from months of planning. I do not understand it. I do not think I ever will. She had enough money. She had a house. She had a son who loved her. What she did not have, perhaps, was the ability to sit at a table and watch other people be celebrated without finding a way to make herself the center of it. I do not know. I am not her therapist. I am only the mother of the bride. But I will say this. The wedding program sat on those tables for less than 14 hours. The replacement cards sat on those tables for the same 14 hours. And yet the original programs, the ones I had printed at my kitchen table, the ones Constance carried out in a canvas bag and put in a drawer in her kitchen, those are the documents that ended up in a courtroom. The replacements are in a sealed evidence box in Eleanor's office. The originals are with my daughter. Paper outlasts the people who try to hide it. That is something Daniel used to say, and I did not understand it until the morning I sat in a conference room and slid a single receipt across a table to my child. There is one more thing I want to say. A few weeks after the judgment, a young woman from the venue called me. Her name was Hannah. She was the staff member who had seen Constance arrive early on the morning of the wedding. She had heard about the case through her supervisor, who had been deposed during discovery. She wanted to apologize. She said, "Mrs. Whitfield, I'm so sorry. I should have called you. I knew something was off. I just did not know what to do." I told her she had nothing to apologize for. She had been 22 years old. She had been told by an older woman that everything was fine. She had no reason to doubt it. I told her that what she could do, going forward, was to remember the small feeling she had had that morning. The feeling that something was not quite right. I told her that that feeling is almost always correct, and that the only mistake we make is in not honoring it. She thanked me. She said she would remember. I think about Hannah sometimes too, about all the young women working at venues across the country, watching mothers of grooms walk through empty rooms with canvas bags. I hope when they see it, they make the call. I hope they trust the small feeling. I hope they do not wait for permission to ask a question. If you are watching this and you have ever stood in a room and felt that something was not right, and you let it go because the person in front of you was older or more confident or more practiced at filling silence, I want you to know something. You were not wrong. You were just early. The truth was already there. You just had not seen the documents yet. The documents are usually already written. Someone has already prepared the receipts. Someone has already printed the program. Someone has already sealed the envelope. The only question is, who keeps the master copy? Keep your master copy. Keep the receipts. Keep the printed page in a manila envelope in your purse, even if you think you will never need it. Keep the ledger in the top drawer of the desk, even after the person who wrote it is gone. Keep the certified letters. Keep the emails. Keep the small printed cards and the canvas bags and the venue camera footage and the deposit slips and the wedding programs folded by hand at a kitchen table on a Tuesday night 3 weeks before a Saturday in October. Because the money does not lie. People lie about money. The money itself just sits there in a column on a page and tells you what happened. And when the time comes and you are sitting at a long wooden conference table across from someone who once stood up at a rehearsal dinner and called your daughter, sweetheart, you will reach into your bag and you will pull out the envelope and you will slide the receipt across the table and you will say the 4 words that every mother in this country should be able to say to her child without having to fight for the right to say them. This is what was always yours. And if stories like this remind you that final wishes deserve respect, subscribe to my channel for more stories. Because sometimes the person who is gone still leaves the strongest voice in the room.